Welcome back to my YouTube channel. The balloons were still floating when the cake started to melt. I kept glancing at the clock, pretending the minutes didn't sting. My daughter Lily sat on the porch swing, clutching the gift bag she'd made for her cousins. Her smile had started bright, hopeful, but now it trembled, slipping into something smaller. Nana said she was coming, she whispered. I nodded. She did, but deep down I already knew. Nobody was coming. Not Mom, not my sister. Not the cousins who once promised we're family forever. We sat there together, watching the candles drip wax over the untouched frosting. I took a shaky breath, lit them anyway, and sang. Alone. Lily's wish was silent. Mine wasn't. I wished I had a different mother. 3 days later, my phone buzzed. Mom. Need $1,850 for your sister's sweet 16. You know how special this is for her. I stared at the screen. The same woman who couldn't text happy birthday to her granddaughter wanted nearly $2,000 for another glitter-filled celebration. Years of memories rushed back. Every time I'd been guilted, manipulated, or ignored. Every Christmas I spent cooking while my sister got praise. Every phone call that began with, "Can you help us out?" and ended with, "You should really be more grateful." So, I did something new. I opened my banking app and sent $1. The note said, "Congrats." Then, I set my phone down, walked to the front door, and changed the locks. It felt strange, powerful and terrifying all at once. For years, I thought boundaries were unkind. That saying no meant I wasn't a good daughter. But that night, as Lily snuggled into my lap, I realized kindness without respect isn't kindness. It's surrender. We made hot chocolate. We laughed. For the first time in years, my house felt safe. The next morning, there was pounding on the door. 2 officers stood outside. "Ma'am," one said carefully, "your mother called. She's claiming you locked her out of her own property." I laughed, sharp, tired, hollow. "This is my house. Bought and paid for by me." They checked the paperwork. 10 minutes later, they apologized and left. But as they walked away, I saw my mother in the driveway, red-faced, yelling something about family. I almost opened the door. Almost. But Lily came to the window, holding her stuffed unicorn, and said, "Mommy, are we okay?" And in that moment, I realized we were better than okay. We were finally free. That night, I tucked my daughter in and whispered, "Sometimes love means walking away." Because family isn't defined by shared DNA or guilt-tripped obligations. It's defined by who shows up, even when no one else does. And from now on, I'll always show up, for her and for myself. The balloons bobbed gently in the breeze, tied to the mailbox that read our family's name in fading paint. I had spent the entire morning decorating, pink and yellow streamers across the fence, a "Happy Birthday, Lily" banner that shimmered when the sunlight hit it just right. Inside, the cake sat perfectly on the counter, the smell of vanilla frosting mixing with the faint scent of candles I'd lit too early. Everything looked perfect, but the silence was starting to grow heavy. Lily kept running to the window, peeking out with that innocent excitement only kids have, the kind that makes you want to protect their hearts from the world. "They're just late, right, Mommy?" she asked, tugging at her little dress that she'd picked herself days ago. I smiled, the kind of smile you wear to keep the truth from spilling out. "Of course, baby. You know Grandma's always late." But an hour passed. Then 2. The party hat stayed untouched. The juice boxes grew warm. And Lily's voice, once bright and cheerful, turned soft and uncertain. "Maybe they forgot?" she said, trying to sound brave. I crouched down beside her and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "No one forgets you, sweetheart. You're unforgettable." My voice wavered a little, betraying the ache I tried to hide. I sent a few texts. Mom, my sister, even my brother who hadn't spoken to me in months. No replies. Not even a "sorry, can't make it," just silence. The kind that feels like a cold wind blowing straight through your chest. By the time the sun started to set, the cake looked lopsided, the icing beginning to soften under the heat. I took the lighter, flicked it on, and lit the 6 candles myself. "Make a wish, my love," I said. Lily hesitated, glancing at the empty chairs one last time before closing her eyes. I watched her lips move in a quiet whisper, her wish sealed somewhere deep in her tiny heart. When she blew out the candles, a tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. I clapped, laughed, made it sound like joy, because she deserved that. I cut the cake, served her a big slice, and told stories that made her giggle until the house echoed with laughter again. But when she finally fell asleep, I sat alone at the table, surrounded by half-inflated balloons and party favors no one had touched. The silence was deafening. I scrolled through old messages, photos of family gatherings I'd planned, holidays I'd hosted, times I'd given, waiting for someone to give back. And that's when it hit me. I had spent so long trying to keep everyone else comfortable, I never noticed how lonely they'd made me feel. The candles had melted into little puddles of wax by then, but I didn't blow them out. I just watched them burn down, one by one, until the flames disappeared, like the illusion of family I'd been holding onto for too long. 3 days later, I was sitting at the kitchen table, half distracted by the sight of Lily coloring in her favorite book when my phone buzzed. For a second, I hoped it might be someone finally reaching out with an apology, maybe my mother explaining why no one had shown up. But when I looked down, I saw her name light up the screen, and under it, the message that made my stomach twist. Mom, need $1,850 for your sister's Sweet 16. You know how special this is for her. I stared at the text for a long moment, unable to decide whether to laugh or cry. My daughter's birthday had come and gone without so much as a card, and now, suddenly, Mom remembered I existed, but only as a wallet. It wasn't new. This pattern had been carved into me since I was old enough to understand what favoritism felt like. My sister, the golden child, everything she wanted was special, everything she needed was urgent, and me, I was the one who always made things happen. The helper. The reliable one. The one who didn't complain. I could almost hear my mother's voice in my head, full of fake sweetness masking manipulation. You know your sister's different. She deserves something nice. That same old line, recycled for every occasion, every excuse. I thought about Lily sitting on the porch swing, waiting for them to come, and the bitterness welled up so fast it made my hands shake. I opened my banking app, watching the numbers on my screen. I could afford it, sure, but this wasn't about money. It was about respect, about boundaries I'd never dared to draw. I remembered every time I'd sent money before. For birthdays I wasn't invited to. For emergencies that somehow always turned into parties. For debts I never owed. Each dollar had been a little piece of me handed over to people who only took. This time I felt something different inside me, something solid and unmoving. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was clarity. I typed in the amount, $1. Not out of spite, but out of symbolism. $1 for every year I'd spent being invisible. Then, in the note section, I wrote one simple word: congrats. When I hit send, it felt like unclenching a fist I'd been holding for years. There was no anger in it, just release. The kind that comes when you finally understand you don't owe anyone the pieces they've been taking from you. I put my phone down and looked at Lily, her little head bent over her drawing, tongue poking out in concentration. I smiled, realizing that she was the only family member who had shown up for me every single day, without asking for anything in return. That's when it hit me that the best thing I could do for her wasn't sending money or pretending everything was fine. It was breaking the cycle. I stood up, walked to the front door, and looked at the locks. The same ones my mother had keys to, the same ones that had opened for people who only ever brought pain through that doorway. Without hesitation, I picked up my phone again, this time to call the locksmith. It was time to make sure those doors stayed closed, for good. When the locksmith left, I stood at the door, turning the new keys over in my hand. They were small and silver, glinting in the late afternoon light, but they felt heavier than anything I'd ever held, like a symbol of everything I was finally ready to protect. I locked the door once, twice, just to hear the click. It was the most satisfying sound in the world. For the first time, that sound didn't mean fear or keeping people out. It meant keeping peace in. The house felt different already. Lighter somehow. Quieter, but not empty, just calm. Lily was sitting on the floor in her pajamas, building a castle out of her toy blocks. When she saw me, she looked up with a curious smile. "Why are you smiling like that, Mommy?" she asked. "Because we're safe now," I said, kneeling down beside her. Safe, from the manipulation, from the guilt, from the constant feeling of not being enough. I didn't even realize how much space that pain had taken up in my life until it was gone. I sat on the couch thinking about how many times I'd opened that same door to my mother's false apologies. how many times I'd let her in, hoping this time would be different. It never was. She'd criticize my choices, call me too sensitive, tell me I owed her for all the sacrifices she made. Every visit left me smaller, emptier, doubting myself all over again. But not this time. This time I didn't crumble under guilt. I didn't reach for excuses to justify her behavior. I didn't tell myself, that's just how she is. Instead, I sat in the stillness and realized something profound. It was never my job to keep fixing people who broke me. As the evening sun poured through the curtains, I thought about that single dollar I'd sent. It wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. My small, quiet way of saying, you no longer get to take from me. That $1 was worth more than any check I'd ever written because it carried truth, strength, and the courage to finally stop begging for love that came with conditions. Later, I made dinner, simple mac and cheese, Lily's favorite. We ate on the couch, watching her favorite cartoon, and it felt like the first peaceful meal we'd had in a long time. No tension, no phone calls buzzing with demands, no sharp words waiting to be thrown like daggers. Just laughter, the sound of spoons clinking, and a calm that settled deep in my bones. After she went to bed, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, the world outside wrapped in quiet darkness. I thought about how for years I'd been afraid of being alone, of what it meant to cut ties with the people who raised me. But now, sitting there with a heart that finally felt steady, I realized I wasn't alone at all. I had my daughter. I had my peace. I had myself. And maybe, just maybe, that was everything I'd been missing all along. That night, as I stood by the window, the house was wrapped in a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the heavy kind that pressed down on your chest. It was light, clean, like fresh air after a storm. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the soft ticking of the wall clock, even the rustle of Lily's blankets in her room, it all sounded like peace. I wrapped my sweater tighter around me and let the feeling sink in. For once, I wasn't waiting for the next phone call, the next crisis, the next guilt trip disguised as family concern. It was strange how quiet freedom could be. There was no grand announcement, no confrontation, no shouting. Just a simple decision to stop opening doors that led to pain. I'd spent my whole life trying to prove I was a good daughter, trying to earn love that should have been given freely. And every time it cost me a little more of myself. But now, standing there in the glow of the streetlight filtering through the curtains, I realized something. Peace isn't given. It's built, brick by brick. With every boundary you set and every no you dare to say. I walked down the hall to check on Lily. She was fast asleep, her stuffed unicorn tucked under one arm, her face calm and soft in the dim light. I brushed a curl away from her forehead and felt a swell of emotion so strong it almost hurt. I knew what it felt like to grow up feeling like an afterthought, always reaching for approval that never came. I swore right then that she would never have to feel that way. She would never sit by a window waiting for people who didn't value her. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the floor and everything felt new. I made pancakes, played music while we ate, and laughed with Lily until my sides hurt. I didn't check my phone once. When it finally buzzed, I ignored it. I didn't need to read the messages to know what they would say. Angry, manipulative words about family duty and ungratefulness. The same script they'd been reading from all my life. But this time the words had no power. I had built walls around my peace, not to shut people out, but to protect what I'd nearly lost. As the day went on, I noticed something small but beautiful. The air in the house felt different. The tension that used to live here, the constant edge, the fear of saying the wrong thing, the guilt after every conversation, it was gone. In its place was warmth, laughter, safety. Later that evening, Lily helped me hang a few of the leftover balloons from her birthday on her bedroom wall. She looked up at me with that same bright smile from a few days ago and said, "Mommy, I had the best birthday ever." My chest tightened with emotion. She didn't care who hadn't shown up. To her, the day was still special because I was there, fully there, not half distracted by the weight of disappointment or old wounds. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "You make every day special, baby." And I meant it. Because in choosing to protect her joy, I'd finally learned how to protect my own. I didn't need my mother's approval. I didn't need to chase love that hurt. All I needed was right here, a small home filled with laughter, peace, and the quiet courage to keep those locks turned tight against anyone who mistook kindness for weakness. The next morning, The pounding on the door was so sudden it made my heart lurch. I froze mid-step, coffee cup halfway to my lips, while Lily looked up from the couch, her cartoon still playing softly in the background. The knocks came again, louder this time, authoritative, demanding. I set the mug down and walked carefully to the door, my mind racing through possibilities. When I opened it, 2 police officers stood there, hands resting casually on their belts, eyes scanning the room behind me. "Ma'am," one of them said in a practiced, calm tone, "we received a call from your mother. She says she's been locked out of her own property." For a moment, I just blinked, stunned by the absurdity of it. My mother, calling the cops on me? Even for her, this was a new low. "This is my house," I said evenly, gripping the doorframe to steady myself. "Bought and paid for in my name." "She's never lived here," the officer nodded politely. "Would you mind showing proof of ownership just so we can clear things up?" I handed over the deed I'd kept tucked in the kitchen drawer for years, more out of habit than foresight. He looked it over, then handed it back with a small, apologetic smile. "Looks like there's been a misunderstanding," he said. "Sorry to bother you, ma'am." But when I glanced past him, I saw her, standing at the edge of the driveway, arms crossed, eyes burning with fury. My mother. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in presence. All her usual power, that sharp edge of control she'd always had over me, had dulled. She was yelling something about family loyalty, about how I'd turned Lily against her, but her words barely reached me. For the first time in my life, her voice didn't carry the weight it used to. It just sounded empty. I almost stepped outside. For a brief second, the old habit kicked in, the instinct to apologize, to explain, to try to make her understand. But then I heard Lily's voice behind me, soft and scared. "Mommy, are we in trouble?" I turned back and saw her standing there, holding her unicorn, eyes wide. That tiny question snapped something inside me back into place. I smiled and crouched down beside her. "No, sweetheart," I said quietly. "We're not in trouble. We're just done being hurt." The officers left a few minutes later, murmuring something about how these family disputes were always complicated. I locked the door again after they were gone, my hands shaking just a little, not from fear but from the sheer finality of it. Outside, my mother's car engine roared to life, and the sound faded down the street until it was gone completely. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was peaceful, cleansing. Lily climbed onto my lap, her tiny fingers tracing the edge of my sleeve. "Can we bake cookies now?" she asked with a smile. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like forever. "Yeah, baby," I said. "Let's bake cookies." As the smell of sugar and butter filled the kitchen, I realized that this quiet defiance, this small, steady joy, was what freedom looked like. No dramatic confrontation, no shouting match. Just a mother and daughter choosing peace over chaos, love over obligation. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, I stood by the same window where I'd once felt so small and powerless. The stars were faint, the moon soft behind thin clouds, but the world outside looked wide and open again. Maybe my mother would never understand. Maybe she'd keep telling her version of the story to anyone who'd listen. But it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't living for her approval, her forgiveness, or her warped idea of family. For the first time in my life, I felt rooted, strong, whole. I had drawn a line, and this time, I hadn't stepped back from it. When I finally turned off the lights and headed to bed, I whispered into the quiet, "We're safe, baby. We're free." And the words didn't feel like hope anymore. They felt like truth. Weeks passed, and life settled into something gentle, something real. The quiet that once felt lonely had become a kind of music I didn't know I needed. Mornings were simple, pancakes and sunlight, Lily's laughter echoing through the kitchen. Evenings were warm, bedtime stories, whispered prayers, and peace that stretched into the night. There were no guilt-laced phone calls, no sudden demands, no walking on eggshells. Just us, steady, safe, and whole. Sometimes I'd catch myself thinking about my mother and sister, wondering if they ever realized what they'd lost. But the thought no longer carried pain. It was just neutral, a reminder of what I'd survived and who I'd chosen to become. Healing wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, made of small choices that built something stronger than what came before. One afternoon, Lily came running in from the yard, cheeks flushed, holding a dandelion in her tiny hand. "Make a wish, Mommy," she said. I closed my eyes, smiled, And for once, I didn't wish for anyone to love me better. I didn't wish for apologies or reconciliation. I just wished for the courage to keep choosing peace, no matter who tried to take it from me. When I opened my eyes, Lily was grinning, the sunlight catching in her hair. And in that moment, I realized this was the life I had been fighting for. Not perfection, but freedom. The kind of freedom that comes when you finally understand that walking away isn't losing, it's winning your life back. So I took her hand, kissed her forehead, and said, "Come on, baby. Let's go home." Because for the first time, home wasn't just a place. It was us.